Chapter 4 of Jack Weatherby, Cat Person. By myself. Jack gathered his things and entered the house through the cat flap in the patio door. Rocky followed close on his heels. The instant they were inside, Rocky started his usual routine of asking for food. "I guess that means you really do know who I am, don't you, buddy?" said Jack. He opened the cupboard under the counter where he kept the big bag of dry cat food that made up most of Rocky's diet. As the door opened, he almost gagged. The food smelled exactly as bad as he remembered it smelling, except that now he had the horrifying feeling of wanting to eat it. His cat body was responding to something in the food the way his human body responded to the wafting smells of cheap Chinese food and Cinnabons when he walked through the mall. He didn't like those foods much either, but they weren't psychologically repulsive in the way dry cat food was. He didn't even want to think about opening the half pouch of wet food that Rocky got each day that sat rubber-banded closed in the refrigerator. "Ugh, how do you eat this stuff?" Jack asked apologetically through his teeth as he used them to tug the bag out of the cupboard. Rocky just purred and rubbed up against the next cupboard over. Jack tugged the bag of food onto its side and bit down gingerly on the handle of the clip that he used to hold the bag closed. Its spring was weak, and it had rubbery grips on the handles, so it wasn't difficult to remove it. Unrolling the bag was no problem either, but it would be tricky to wield the measuring cup with his mouth. Still, he didn't want to just get in the habit of scraping cat food onto the floor with his paw, particularly since Rocky was finding it more difficult lately to bend his head down to eat. So Jack managed to get some food into the scoop and dump it into Rocky's food bowl, which he had taped to an overturned Tupperware to elevate it a few months earlier. It didn't help that Rocky was trying to eat it directly from the measuring cup the whole way there. As he thought about the ease with which he had been able to open the bag, he wondered why Rocky didn't just get the food for himself on other days. It wasn't difficult physically, as Jack had just discovered, and Rocky had proven himself clever enough to get through more complex obstacles than a cupboard door and a bag clip on many occasions. Maybe he was just used to being served. Jack chuckled to himself. "Bon appetit, Your Majesty." He thought about just skipping the wet food for now, but he knew Rocky wouldn't give him peace later until he served it to him. So Jack steeled himself and went to find a clean sock he could use to open the refrigerator. He had seen plenty of videos online of dogs doing it, so it couldn't be that hard, right? He pushed the toe of the sock through the handle with one paw and tugged it down with the other until it lined up with the open end. Stretching up on his hind legs, he just managed to get both ends in his mouth, then tried to walk backward on his back paws. Nothing. He tugged harder. Still nothing. Jack dropped to all fours again. He must weigh, 10, 12 pounds? Surely a refrigerator door didn't require more than that much force to open, right? Maybe something longer than a sock would let him pull at a better angle. He found a belt and tried it, but even with all 4 feet on the ground, he couldn't get it to open. His paws just kept slipping on the linoleum. There had to be some better way to do this. "Okay, universe, I get it," Jack fumed. "I'm glad I'm not usually a cat. I'm happier as a human. Now make me human again." He remained a cat. After a little more thought, Jack jumped onto the counter and tugged open one of the kitchen drawers where he stored office supplies and anything else that didn't really have a place. He batted things out of the way and had to refocus himself after he found himself playing with a bit of string that got stuck to his paw, then found what he was looking for. A thin wooden ruler, 1 foot long. He pulled it up over the edge of the drawer and let it drop to the ground, then nudged it over toward the refrigerator with his nose. After a few tries, he got it into his mouth vertically so that it stuck out to the sides, and he managed to force it between the metal frame of the fridge and the rubber seal around the door. Then holding it up with one paw so that it remained perpendicular to the edge of the fridge, he pushed it forward with the top of his head. After 2 or 3 steps forward, he heard the satisfying sound of the fridge seal opening, and the ruler clattered to the ground. Jack hurried to get his paw into the opening, then pulled the door open. The array of scents that washed over him made him hungry, but he had a little research to do before he ate anything else that might settle the wrong way the yogurt had. Instead, he just got the pouch of wet cat food from the bottom shelf, tugged the rubber band off of it, held his breath as he mashed it out clumsily into Rocky's bowl with his paws, careful to touch only the bag and not the food. "There, eat." Rocky needed no encouragement. Jack fled the kitchen so that his conflicting feelings about the smell wouldn't combine with Rocky's noisy lip-smacking to make him sick. He lay down on the couch to think. Was everything going to be this complicated? He had just spent 20 minutes feeding Rocky that he really should have spent working on his report for work. He was much more tired than he expected after dragging his bag all the way home, and he felt himself crashing after the adrenaline rush of his encounter with the dog. He had already lost half his workday to a tuna coma. He couldn't afford to slack off now. So Jack held his breath as he darted into the kitchen to grab his bag, and then set up his phone to sync with the TV and installed some more apps as he had planned that morning. He still couldn't quite type as quickly as he had with fingers, but the swiping method was working well enough. Rocky soon came into the living room and settled into his bed at the foot of the recliner to groom. He stared at Jack for a while, then curled up to sleep. Jack lost track of time as he got into the flow of his work. Occasionally, he would glance at the messages and emails arriving from work. Nothing urgent. And there were hardly ever messages from anyone but coworkers these days. His group of friends from college had all gone their separate ways to different states after graduation, and they were all mostly devoted to establishing their careers. Since moving here, Jack had also devoted his free time mostly to his work projects, determined to make a good impression and get ahead. He had no real friends here, just neighbors he would nod to or exchange pleasantries with once every few weeks if they happened to cross paths. As for romance, Jack didn't have much of a taste for it still, not since Alice had dumped him right before their graduation. He sometimes doubted he would ever want to date again after that. He certainly wasn't about to keep thinking about it with this deadline looming. After a few hours, Jack's stomach started growling at him, so he went to the kitchen for a drink. He wouldn't be able to open anything in a sealed container like a bottle of soda or boxed juice, so he didn't even try. The sink would present no trouble, though, as it had a lever to turn the water on and off rather than knobs. It took him a little practice and some water up his nose before he figured out how to lap up the water streaming from the tap with his tongue, rather than try to slurp it with his lips the way he used to do as a kid, when all the cups were dirty. Then he opened the fridge with the ruler again and stared inside, hoping for some inspiration about what to eat. He looked up at the freezer. How was he going to get in there? It's just not worth it, he thought. I'll deal with that later. There was plenty of reachable food in the kitchen, but what to eat? Suddenly remembering his earlier caution, he went back to his phone to find out what human foods were safe for cats. Cooked meat, cooked grains, cooked fish, cooked eggs, cucumber, cantaloupe, steamed broccoli, asparagus. Those are all okay, Jack thought. I'm sure there's something like that in my fridge. Anything I should avoid? Raw meats, eggs, fish, etc. Okay, duh, I wouldn't have considered those options anyway. Onions, garlic, and chives can induce anemia in cats. Really? Oh, okay then. Less spicy food. Dairy's probably bad, I learned that the hard way. Grapes and raisins? Those were some of his favorite snacks. But choosing between snacks and kidney function, he would pick the kidney function any day. Chocolate? Caffeine? No! He wasn't an energy drink junkie or anything, but this was too much. He read a little further. Okay, so he could take a lick or two for flavor now and then, and without any danger, but no more morning coffee. Jack sighed, and a wave of grief rolled over him. It wasn't the coffee that he was grieving, that was just the trigger. It was this whole cat thing. Why me? He thought to the universe. Why that wish? Couldn't you have granted me any of the other idle wishes I've made over the years? $1 million? Making me a rock star? World peace, even? No, you made me a cat. Jack huffed, then went back to the kitchen. He microwaved some oatmeal and grabbed some beef jerky out of a resealable bag in the cupboard. Then he gnawed on the end of a cucumber while he waited for the oatmeal to cool. No sense risking a burned snout when it was now the most sensitive part of his body. When he finished his meal and felt satisfied, Jack looked at what was left. He had eaten only about a third of the cucumber, 2 inches of the beef jerky, and maybe a quarter cup of oatmeal. Jack did a little mental math. He could eat this dinner for 2 more days at this rate. Just by sheer volume, he was eating about a tenth of what he normally ate, and it was all really cheap, basic food. With a bit of a shock, Jack realized I could spend less on my own food than I do on Rocky's. That really set him thinking. Forget food. I don't even need clothes anymore. Sure, it felt weird to be naked, but he was cat naked, not person naked. No clothes meant no laundry. No laundry meant a lower electricity and water bill. His tiny mortgage was smaller than most people's car payments. He could forget about driving his old junker of a car, too, so that cut gas, maintenance, repairs, and car insurance out of his costs. As long as he was thinking of insurance, he doubted his health insurance provider had any sort of coverage for becoming a cat, so if he was stuck this way, he might as well drop that, too. Jack spent a minute with the calculator app on his phone, then stared out the window while it sunk in. He could now pay off his student loans in about a quarter of the time. He was hardly a millionaire, but that lifted a great weight from his shoulders. Chalk one more up for being a cat, he concluded grudgingly. Feeling refreshed, Jack went back to work and stopped around midnight. He walked slowly to the bathroom. He used the toilet, grateful not to be under a bush this time. Then he pondered his toothbrush and toothpaste. He had no idea what the chemicals in his toothpaste might do to a cat's mouth, but he didn't need to look that up to know it probably wasn't a good idea. Rocky never used a toothbrush, obviously, but the vet said he did get some tooth cleaning benefit from eating his dry food. Jack still wasn't ready to stoop that low, so he pulled his toothbrush from its cup, using his teeth, and ran some water on it. Then he jumped to the floor with it, stood it between his paws with the tip of its handle on the ground, and then moved his head around to scrub his teeth against the bristles. Satisfied and rather pleased with himself, he rinsed it off and returned it to his cup. Curling up on his bed, he felt a strong urge to groom himself. Having done it once already that day, he figured he might as well roll with it. He wasn't in the mood to shower anyway. I hope I don't get a hairball. Once again, the sensation of setting all his fur just right was very satisfying, and the simple pleasure of it drove worries about work out of his mind. He tucked his nose under the tip of his tail, took a few breaths, and drifted off to sleep. The end of chapter 4. Anybody who's watching, if you don't mind either commenting or just liking the video, I'm curious to know how many people watch, and I don't have any way of knowing that unless you leave some sort of record. So I'd appreciate that. And share with other people. It'd be nice to have more people join us each day. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you tomorrow.